stress is a huge thing, you know, and especially when people have these chronic illnesses, it's always great when you have, you know, people around you that understand what's the matter. But it's very difficult for people who feel good, because you have a good day and they feel you're better. But it's very important. It's very stressful. You feel the people around you think you're making it up, or you're lazy, or you're whatever. It's very, very stressful. And of course, because you're sick, everything is stressful. Getting up is stressful. Getting your clothes on is stressful. Having a little comment from a sibling is stressful. While when you feel healthy, that's not a problem. So there's a lot of things one can do about it. Actually, this MBSR here, it stands for Mindful-Based Stress Reduction. It's an 8-week course, and we actually started one on Tuesday again. We do this 8-week course here where you meet once a week and then you practice at home with some of the mindful-based techniques. And you know, I'm doing it again myself because I needed a refresher. You know, I lost my discipline. So I do that to help me, and you know, meditation, I think some physical activities, support groups. You know, many people are helped when they see a counselor. So there's various things you have to do with stress. And what I do find is that once people get better and they feel physically better, when you work with their adrenals and you kill some bugs and you clean their gut and they diet up, that often things that were stressful suddenly are not that stressful anymore. You know, where the bad stress turns into good stress as an exciting thing. Many people lose their friends. You know, you're sick, you're tired, everybody's busy, and then you lose your friends. You know, because they can't handle you being sick, or you can't participate in it. Sleep, there's a lot of natural things that can help with sleep. I try various things. Many people need prescriptions to sleep. And you know, the whole thing, I think there's a lot with nowadays with our disturbance of day-night rhythms because of all the lights we get exposed to, especially LED lights. LED lights are very high in blue light, and they inhibit melatonin. Incandescent bulbs suppress melatonin a little bit. These fluorescent lights do it more, and then the LED lights do it a lot more. You know, the Apple has actually something built in it in the evening when it gets later in the day. The screen changes where there's less blue light. But you know, these little glasses, they're like $10. They're blue light filter glass. So ideally, when you're after 6 o'clock in the evening, when you're on the computer or watching TV, you should wear these glasses. Because you see how especially with the younger people, boy, you see that their day-night rhythms are even more disturbed than we. You know, I mean, when I was growing up, you didn't call anybody after 8 o'clock. You know, you got a slap. And you didn't call anybody before 8 in the morning either. But these kids are constantly interacting with each other. Their sleep gets disturbed. And I think we're going to see more and more trouble with that. It has enormous effects on your biorhythms. And they are important for us to be healthy. We need sleep to recover. Yeah, when you go into sleep, you go into a parasympathetic state versus a sympathetic state, and that's when the body heals. And then, you know, movement, we need to move, exercise, physical therapy, chiropractor, body work. There's all kinds of things one can do. And, you know, I always try to guide people to pick and choose. You can't do everything. You know, who can afford seeing all these people? You know, but I've over the many years I've you know, worked and got to know many things that one could do, and so you have to just pick and choose and recommend people to you know, direct them in the right person. The bowel is very important. I treat yeast very aggressively when you're on antibiotic. I always put anti-yeast medicine and herbs in there, probiotics. So it's very important, and there's certain herbs that can help you not get stomach problems. You know, because many people get nauseous and their stomach hurts whenever they take an antibiotic, and there are herbals to use with that. And that's what I was talking already about the adrenals, the thyroid, and in women, the female hormones, men, testosterone. I see a lot of people who are chronically ill. Men have low testosterone, the women have hormonal imbalances with estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. I use testosterone on a lot of women. And then there is the adrenal function. There's a lot of herbs you can use for adrenal support, but I also use a lot, very small amounts of hydrocortisone.
Do you do the hormone therapies here, or do you
Yes.
send that out? Okay.
I've done hormone therapies for 23 years. So work with bioidentical hormone creams. I do one form of hormone reimplant pellets. I've done that for 10 years. You know, you can do some things orally, like thyroid and various forms. It's a very individual
Sure.
process, and it needs to be all in balance. You know, the thyroid is not separate from the adrenals. Like many people, they get, say, they are diagnosed with hypothyroidism or low thyroid, the doctor gives them thyroid hormone and don't feel any better. Because the adrenals are weak too, and when you go back to, you know, pre-med or high school biology, and you look at where the body makes energy, which is inside the mitochondria, you need both thyroid and your adrenals. And if you don't have both of them there or optimal, then you just can't mobilize fat to get burned up into energy. And so I do a lot of work a lot with these basic sciences that I learned in medical school in the early years. In Holland, we don't have pre-med. You go right to medical school after high school. So what here is pre-med, you do right all in medical school. You're in there for 6 to 7 years. So this is very important. And then there's some other things, you know. There's some herbals and enzymes that can break down biofilm. That's a little bit of a picture of biofilm. It's like this gooey, sticky stuff. There are labs that actually can see that. You can send them a blood sample, and they make films of that. You know, so there's some enzymes that help with that, because that might make the antibiotics work better. When you give these enzymes together with the antibiotics and you break down biofilm, the antibiotics can get better in. So that's...
Can I ask you about the ozone? The biofilm?
Yeah.
It destroys biofilm?
Well, ozone breaks down biofilm. Ozone kills everything. Every bug, except you. I use a lot of ozone. I'll talk a little bit later about ozone.
Hey Doc,
Yes.
regarding the biofilm, does Cinemax or Linear break that up as well?
I have no experience with that. I don't know. People may say that. You see, it's very hard. Even those things, Serapep, all that.
Right.
People say, oh, that breaks down biofilm. I say, well, how do you know? I don't know. You know, it's a little bit hard within this whole picture. Yeah, when people do something, say you take an antibiotic, and then you take something with it that's supposed to break down biofilm, and you feel worse. And then you say, oh, that must be good because I'm feeling worse, because I have Herxheimer. You know, in one way, Herxheimer means your body can't handle the detox. Now, a little bit of Herxheimer is fine, but if you have too much, you just burden your body too. So it's a very difficult thing. So we have to work to, you understand what I mean? That you have to work kind of, it's a balance that you have to find. And I find often when you clean people's diet up and you support their adrenals and you do other things, that then you start killing all bugs and they don't really get that sick because their body can handle it. I say the antiparasitics, I worked with them for years and I was just not very impressed, and so I haven't really worked with that. LDN, low dose naltrexone. There is a concept that, you know, we have substances in our brain called endorphins, and endorphins are narcotic-like substances that make us feel good. Naltrexone is a narcotics antagonist. It's what the medics give somebody when they find somebody with an overdose. It neutralizes the narcotics, and suddenly the person wakes up. Yeah, they might die, but then they give them naltrexone. That's what anesthesiologists give people when they put them down. They give them a drug that neutralizes, and then they wake up. Well, we have narcotics in our brain called endorphins, and they found that when you actually give a teeny bit of naltrexone in the evening, that you temporarily suppress your endorphins, but then as a reflex they go up. So there's some people with autoimmune diseases and AIDS, that even some conventional gastroenterologists done work with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. That's supposed to help the immune system. I mean, I've been doing this off and on for 20 years, and I'm a little like, maybe. So when people come and ask for it, I always give it, because I really don't see any problem with it, except when they're on narcotics. If people are on narcotics, you don't give naltrexone, but it's a thing one can do. And then, you know, nutritional support, you always have, there's a lot of nutrients can support the bowel and the nervous system and you know, the joints, many different. I do a lot of nutrients to support mitochondrial functioning. Often once people start getting better, you find that their whole energy production is down. So I work a lot with nutrients to help that. That's the mitochondria. So, you know, here, what you see here is, you know, fat. To mobilize fat, you need your thyroid and your cortisol. And that mobilizes the fat to get into the mitochondria. Here the oxygen comes in, and it goes to this thing called the Krebs cycle, or citric acid cycle, with the help of all these vitamins and minerals and amino acids. And that makes ATP. See, that is the energy. And what happens when this doesn't work well, to either aging, disease, whatever it is, we go anaerobic. You know, and some of that happens with aging, but what happens when people are sick, you find that anaerobic metabolism is very inefficient, and you tire out very quick. And when you do anything anaerobically, you're just building up debt you have to pay off. Like when you have a top sprinter and they run a 100-yard dash, they have to recover. They go fully, and they go in a certain moment anaerobic, while a long distance runner, they can keep running and running, and they're skinny as a rail because they burn up all their fat. And so what happens that people, when they're chronically ill, and especially when you have Lyme disease, they just walking on the street. They go anaerobic. And they just, you know, and what does anaerobic do? It makes lactic acid, you're more achy, and then you get into the cycle, and then people say, wow, I want to exercise, get back into shape, and then they do too much, and then you stop. You know, very interesting phenomenon that you all know is that, what do we do in January? You know, we're 30, 40, or 50, or 60, and we gotten a little weight gain, and we say, let's join the health club. So you join the health club, yeah, and you get a young trainer who's going to whip you in shape. Yeah, but what happens, the way we utilize oxygen goes down with aging. We're not as good utilizing oxygen. So what happens, you join the gym, this trainer is going to push you, you actually utilize more anaerobic metabolism, so therefore you don't burn up fat, and you end up more tired. So by the end of February, you quit. So what you need to do is slow down, do very little, do little interval training where you do, you know, a minute full blast, because when you do a minute full blast, you trigger the system. Yeah, when you do 5 minutes full blast, you overwhelm the system. So when people are, you know, they've been chronically ill and they want to get back in shape, I always say go for a walk, and then during a half an hour, for 1 minute, you go, you know, even if you can jog, you get a heart rate up to 160, but then you do it only for a minute, and then you wait till your heart rate comes all the way backwards. Sometimes it can take 5-10 minutes. And then you can do it again, and by doing that, you trigger the mitochondria, and then they recover. But what we mostly do, we go exercise and we want to get back in shape, and we overwhelm it. So that is something that's very interesting. You know, and it applies to people who have Lyme disease, but also in everybody else. So oxidative therapies, there's various oxidative therapies that one can do. Of course, you might all have heard of hyperbaric oxygen. You know, my experience with people who've done hyperbaric oxygen, they feel better when they do it, but then once they stop, it gets worse again, because what happens with hyperbaric oxygen, you do increase the oxygen in the cells, and Lyme doesn't like that. But you only increase the oxygen when you're in the chamber, because it's only based on pressure. with ozone, you increase the oxygen is available from the red blood cells, and it lasts. It keeps happening. You know, so I talked a little more about ozone, ultraviolet light. We do various treatments here. We do ozone in various ways. We treat the blood with ultraviolet light. IV vitamin C, I don't necessarily find that I treat for Lyme, but sometimes these little cocktails with vitamins and vitamin C can help people. It perks them up. It gives them a lot of nutrients that support the mitochondria, and it really perks them up. And then glutathione is a substance that you have in every cell of your body that helps with detoxification and cell regeneration and nerve regeneration. So ozone therapy does a lot. Ozone kills every virus, bacteria, mold that we know. There's not one that's resistant to it. However, our cells don't get killed by it. Actually, they found ozone inside your white blood cells. So you say, well, how do white blood cells kill bugs? Yeah, so when you get a bug in your body, the body recognizes them as a bad bug, the white blood cell comes up like an amoeba, you know, and wraps around the bug, absorbs it in, and then it fuses with something called a lysosome. And lysosome, they found hydrogen peroxide. The thing is, oxygen radicals can be harmful, but only when they're out of balance. Our body has enzymes in place that protect us from these damage they do. So on top of that, ozone, it increases the amount of oxygen available to the cells, it increases glutathione levels, all kind of things that ozone does. And so in the last couple of years, I've been working a lot with various forms of ozone. You know, there's ways where we can actually take the blood out and we ozonate it and then put it back in, and we combine that with exposing the blood to ultraviolet light. I mean, you all know that ultraviolet light is used to clean surfaces, it kills bugs. There are ways where we have this ozone sauna, and many of my patients, once they start getting better, they can do ozone at home by doing rectal insufflation. They get a little ozone generator, you fill an enema bag, they put it in the bottom, hold it in for a few minutes, and the ozone gets absorbed to the lining of the bowel. They've done in Cuba work with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's with rectal ozone and seen improvement that lasts for months and months. It's a very simple thing to do. You know, it sounds kind of strange. Yeah, I have the average American guy always say, huh? Not for me. But when you see how easy that is, it's very easy to do. And it's not as good as the blood treatments, but you know, I think it's a fantastic method.
How much does it raise the glutathione?
Actually?
How much does it raise?
Well, what they found in Cuba, that when they did rectal ozone, that it increased the enzyme glutathione synthetase that recycles glutathione. And when they did a certain number of treatments, I can't remember how many, that level stayed up for several months, which is quite long.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they found. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I mean, we do intravenous glutathione, but also there's certain, like the amino acid L-cysteine is a direct precursor for glutathione. And that, I found it to even be better than N-acetylcysteine. N-acetylcysteine doesn't occur in the body, but L-cysteine is much cheaper.
You're doing that orally or IV?
Orally, yeah. So the next thing that I want to bring up, which I've been working with since last year, is something called low-dose immunotherapy. Very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So low-dose immunotherapy is based on the idea that when people are chronically ill with these infections, that it may not be the bug causing the problem. The Lyme bug is there, but that the problem is caused by your immune system freaking out about it. Just like with an allergy. If you have pollen allergy, yeah, it's the pollen is not causing the problem. The problem is caused by your immune system reacting to it. So, you know, if I sit with somebody on a bench and a whiff of pollen comes by and I just breathe it in, I'm fine, and you get all congested, well, I breathe in the pollen too. It's not doing anything to me. The problem is caused by your immune system reacting to it. And so there were doctors thinking that. So what do we do when somebody has allergies? Well, we either suppress the immune system's reaction by giving steroids or antihistamines, or we give them allergy shots. Yeah? We give them a little bit of what you're allergic to in an injection or whatever under the tongue, and it seems when you get the right dose to calm down the immune system. Yeah? So there's a doctor who said, well, what if that's the matter with Lyme? You know, you give these people antibiotics, and so, you know, and I kind of watched, wow, another new thing. But then some doctors that I found very credible started working with that, and they thought they were game changers. So this doctor mixed up, you know, got dead Lyme bugs and diluted them out in an amount that you say, this is crazy, this is water. And he did that either in an injection under the tongue, and people started getting better. And so we've been working with that since, July last year, and you know, the problem is if you give the remedy a little too strong, you make people worse. Just temporarily, but they can get worse depending on how far off you are. And then when you give them the right weak remedy, it doesn't do anything. If you give them a remedy of something that's not a problem, it doesn't do anything. But we've seen some dramatic results with some people. I mean, you give them these, it's just a drop under the tongue. And you know, I had one lady who had constant, you know, herpes outbreaks in her mouth and bad headaches for years and years and years. And I gave her a herpes remedy because they're all there for viruses, for Lyme, for foods. And suddenly for 2 months, no more outbreaks. Because at last, you have to repeat it, just like you have to repeat allergy shots. So it's very interesting, and it's kind of a skill digging, and the patients has to be patient because, you know, you don't want to guess too low because then you make people worse. And if you, you know, guess, you know, way too low, then, you know, then it takes you a long time before you get the right remedy. So it's a very interesting, if anybody of you wants to look anything up about that, if you go onto YouTube, yeah, and you look up the name Ty Vincent, T-Y, and then the name Vincent, and then you punch in LDI, and he has his little 5-minute YouTube where he explains all of that. Very fascinating. So that is just something that I find. So the question is that people then say, but doctor, why did I get better with my antibiotics if that's the problem? Well, if I have bugs in my body and they're not causing the problem, yeah, then taking an antibiotic doesn't make anything. But if I have bugs in my body and the body is reacting to it, if I take antibiotics, I reduce the number of bugs, even though I may never get rid of it. If I stop the antibiotics, the bugs come back a little bit, even though they're not the problem, but the body reacts worse. Does that make sense? That's the way, you know, we try to explain it. Very, very interesting. So I you know, I want to encourage you to look some things up about that. Yes?
Has there been any correlation with people who tend to have allergies, like pollen allergies or whatever, and people who have a reaction to Lyme that's different than...
Well, not that I know of. This LDI came from LDA, low-dose antigen therapy, where they actually did that for foods and environmental chemicals and toxins and environmental allergies and that. And that's where they were doing that. And then this one doctor who did that, his name Ty Vincent, he said, what if that we do that with these? So whether there's, you know, more or less, I don't know.
Did the FDA shut down the LDA?
Huh?
Didn't the FDA shut down the LDA?
No, they discouraged the studies going on. So the guy, one of the doctors involved, he's got a clinic in Mexico because he was in Arizona, and they did a lot of research there. And so now this substance, you get, there's one pharmacy who makes that.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
did they make it change? The one that you can get in this country is different than what they get in...
Well, there was a certain enzyme that
Yeah,
you're using,
right.
but that enzyme is available, but it's just all you have to, you know, there's a lot of things one can do off-label as individual physicians. You're just not allowed to sell these things or to make claims. Does that make sense?
Are you combining the LDI with that enzyme?
I do have the enzyme, yes, but sometimes I use it and sometimes I don't. We find sometimes it doesn't make any difference. Doctors have all kind of opinions about it. You know, many doctors fiddle with these things. And you know, the LDIs now, you can make up your own remedies about stuff. Dr. Vincent has made up remedies from people's stool for ulcerative colitis. You know, but they're so diluted and they're filtered. There's no bacteria in it. And seeing ulcerative colitis, either gets worse or better. It's really quite amazing. But it takes a long time to get experience with it. Yeah. Now, within the alternative medicine, people use all kind of diagnostic techniques. That people use little machines on acupuncture points. Doctors use the various forms of muscle testing. I used to do that way back. Found it useful. It's useful. I just had a doctor join in here one day a week who is very proficient in that. And what we found is that he almost can test that we hit the right remedy rather than
That's
me
what I was wondering.
than me trying, you know, because I've had some, early on I had some of my patients that we got them and I gave them a remedy way too strong. I mean, it got worse for like 6 weeks.
What machine is he using? What systems?
What did you say?
The guy you brought in, what system is he
It's
using?
like an ART, like Klinghardt
Yeah.
systems, yeah. And I did recently some training, and the way Klinghardt teaches is so complex. I just don't have the time, but he has done it a lot. And most doctors that work with these systems, they find shortcuts.
What's his name?
Huh?
What's your
Dr. Alhoff,
A-L?
Alhov. Yeah, he has a practice in Brooklyn actually, and he's,
Comes here once a week.
well, slowly he's gonna come here. So that is low dose immunotherapy. We do low intensity laser therapy. Laser can help heal joints, reverse degeneration, various things. So just different, you know, when you work with people with chronic illness, you have to do all kind of various things. We do neurofeedback, I mentioned that, especially once people get better, you know, their brain just ain't working the way it was. Neurofeedback also helps with, you know, PTSD, ADD, traumatic brain injury. There's a lot of research about neurofeedback. Oops, that was one too soon. And, you know, so it's a complex, multifactorial illness. You know, it's a life changer. You know, you have to constantly keep searching, never believe when people say, oh, you can't get better, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, there's a lot of people constantly trying to learn about this, working with it. Every practitioner does their thing. You know, even though there's a lot of interaction going on, there are various ways. It can be very confusing as a patient because people do all these various things, but you know, you have to just kind of stay with it. And that's my, you know, what I don't understand does exist, and we should work ceaselessly to try to understand.
So do you look at it more as remission?
Hmm?
Do you look at it more as remission? Or do you look at it as eradication?
Well, you see, the idea of, you know, to me it's, can you live a well life, whether you're cured or not cured, does it mean? See, that's in one way, when you look at it at that linear model, like I have a disease and now I'm cured. What you need to do is you have to restore your functioning and you have to learn how to maintain that function. And sometimes you have to repeatedly treat people for bugs, and sometimes you have to go back constantly to eating a healthy diet and taking some nutrients. The people, in my experience, that relapse from illnesses, one, they start eating bad, they start taking their vitamins, and they're under a lot of stress. Yeah, those are the three big things. Now, I've seen many, many people that are treated years ago for Lyme, and they call me up and they say, I think my Lyme is back, I have all these symptoms back, and I listen to them. But what I think is that when you've had these chronic illnesses, it creates weaknesses in your body. Does that make sense? Your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, doesn't have the same reserve. You know, the body has organ reserve. And then, so that these chronic illnesses have created the weakness. So there, but for somehow we got you on top. And then either bad food, stress, whatever it is, brings these weaknesses to the top, and the symptoms are exactly the same you had when you had Lyme disease. And I often hear that, and when I ask some questions, it turns out there were stressful events in the family. Yes, I'm stopped taking my vitamins because I was feeling better, and I'm eating bad. And then I say, why don't you clean up your diet, we support the adrenals, we work with stress. Sometimes in 2-3 weeks, all the symptoms go away again. Most of the time. Does that make sense? So that an integral part of treating these illnesses is that you have to learn how to take care of yourself. Yeah? You're more fragile. Yeah? Another person might be able to do these things, but you have to get to know your fragility. So it's not always about Lyme, does it make sense, or having a bacteria. So to me, I am actually convinced that I myself have Lyme in a body and I'm not sick.